So from after previous map method, we just commented out this one. So we'll just leave it down here, and then we'll just go above here. So let's now use the map and for each method to compute usernames for each account owner in our applications. So here we have here the four accounts. You can see here account 1, account 2, account 3, and account 4, which is these accounts. Okay. So we have these four accounts, and for each of them, we want basically compute a username, and then the username is simply the initials of each of the users. So let's just start with one of them. So just with one string to make it really easy, then we'll generalize the function for the entire accounts array that we have down here. So which contains all of the accounts, but for now, I'll just grab the string here and let's just create a username for this one. So let me just do that here. So here let me just create users, and then here for now let me just grab this Stephen Thomas Williams. So this name here, so I'm using this here. So this one, when we just call it out, it should be in the small letters, which is the starting letter of each word. It should be in this format. Okay. So let's just create that now. So we'll create that now here, constant username here. We'll just set this user, our user, this name to lowercase, and then here we'll just simply split it using the space here. Okay. And let me just console log this username. As you can see here, it was divided by using the split here. Okay. So how can we take the first letter of the each word? So we can simply loop over this array and then take the first letter in each iteration and then add them into a new array, and in the end we should join the array. So let's do that. So looping over this array takes the first letter and putting it into a new array, and that is exactly the map method does. So we can do that directly here. The split method here returns an array, and we can call the map method on the resulting array. So let's do that here. So let me just say here dot map of, and this one here returns a string, and split is available on strings. So let's define our callback function here. So it will just start by doing an irregular function. So let me just say here function of, so here I'm using here the name. Okay. In this here we'll just say we want to return the name of 0, right, which is the array of 0 element here, which is the S, T, and W. Okay. See here, now we see that the first three letters in the array converted into this small letters as well. Okay. Now on an array we can just call this join method here. Here I'll use dot join. So when I run it, as you can see here, we got the output here. So let's now simplify this callback function by deleting the function here. So we can just simply just delete this function here. And then here we can just say use the arrow function here. And also we don't require the curly braces here. And then we don't require here the return. And then here it should be the join. Okay. After join your console, so when we run this, see here we got exactly the same output. So let's now actually take this here into a function. So I'm removing this here, and then here I'll just create one more constant here, and then create user names So here we'll say function of user, and then in here we'll just put, so after writing this, here we need to return, right, in this function. Here we'll just return the username. Here we'll just console.log create usernames of, which is Stephen, Thomas, Williams. Okay. So when we run this, so here what we'll just do is we'll just remove this, and then here it should be the user, not users. So when we run this, as you can see here, we are getting the stw. So this is correct. And also we need to do some more changes in this code, but so here we'll just remove this console.log and then the brackets as well. So to do that, should we use the map or the for each method? Well, we don't want to create a new array in this situation. All we want to do is to modify this object. So the elements that already exist in the accounts array. So basically here in this array, as you can see here, so array accounts array, as you can see this here. So what we want is to simply loop over this array and then do something, so that what we want to do, and so what we want that is we use for each. So let's modify this function here some more. Instead of simply receiving one user, what we want to do is receive all the accounts. So basically an array of account user, just replace it here with the account, create usernames to be account. So we'll just simply put account because it is a short abbreviation, so that we won't get confused. So basically an array of account, this goes back to the philosophy I explained to you in the last lecture, which is that each function should actually receive the data that it should work with, instead of using a global variable. That's exactly what we did here with the moments. So we could have directly read here from this accounts.moments, for example, but instead we created a function that receives the data and can work with the data or with any other data that we choose to pass into it. And so here we are doing the same thing. So we don't want to rely on the accounts array that we already have, but instead we want to pass into the function here, because this error pops up because here we are using the access, and then here we are just simply declaring here in our code the user. So that is why here it is getting the error. So let's quickly change that here, and here we'll just change this as well here too. So we want from the universal, right? So we'll just say accounts. So after this, here I'm going to declare the function here. So access dot, for each method here I'm going to declare for each of function of access, and then here I'll just simply just copy this and then remove from here, and then here I'll just paste it. So here we don't require here return username, and here we need to remove this username here. So here we'll just simply say here accounts dot username, and here username dot owner. So when we run this, yeah, here it is not user because it should be here the account. So then it works perfectly fine now. And now, as we are saying, we need to use the for each method like here we used, because again we don't want to create a new array, and simply we want to modify basically the array that we get in as an input. So this is really important distinction to keep in mind. So here we are again talking about the side effects that I mentioned in the last video, and in this case the side effects are going to be the change. So to the mutate the original accounts array, and that's what we want to do it here. And so for each is the way to go. And so for each account in accounts array, okay, so in this accounts array, in this function, we don't return here anything, because again we are doing here is to produce a side effect, and we are doing something to this account object here. There is no need to return anything, and we are just basically doing work here. So we are not creating a new value to return. And if we want to see if it actually worked, so here let me just say console.log, and then here say accounts. So when we run this, as you can see here, we got the output. See here, we got every accounts here. So in here we can see our objects with a new property indeed, and we get the username of JS, and this one should be JD, and then here for Stephen Thomas Williams, and it is the STW, and that we had previously worked with. So in this lecture, it is very important to understand the use case for the map method here, which was perfect because it allows us to create a new simple array which only contains the initials of whatever the name it is used on. So then on the other hand, for each method, it was a great use case to produce some called this side effects. So in other words, to simply do some work without returning anything, that's what we did here. We simply looped over the accounts array. In each iteration, we manipulated the current account object and added a username to it based on the account owner, plus all of these transformations that we have already done before. So the couple of interesting and important takeaways from this video, okay, so make sure to review it properly and then move on to the next transforming method, which is the filter method.